So I'd like to take just a moment to start, just a moment of pause and mindful recollection. Then I'll begin with the chant. Namo Tathālokā Bhikkhunī Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. My loving reverence to my original teacher, the Blessed One, the Buddha, to all of the great, wonderful, noble, liberating Dhamma teachings, and to all of the members of the noble Sangha throughout the world and throughout time and space. And the ancient Buddhas of the past and all of their awakened disciples. The awakened disciples of the present. Also those who are in the process of awakening now, including us, including all of us. So, my greetings to all of you from Santa Rosa, where here outside now it is a late winter, early spring day. The Sonoma Hills are all turning emerald green, and the blossoms are coming forth from the trees. The golden demo wheel flags are moving in the gentle afternoon breeze, and it's just afternoon here. Monastic community here, which I would love to show you, but I don't have that technology. They all had lunch early today, and I appreciate them for supporting and for supporting us having this time together. There are also the room here also has other old and new Dhamma who are joining live together with all of you online. So I think it's an especially auspicious time for this teaching for several reasons. One, this full moon that was still shining brightly this morning a few hours ago is a very important lunar anniversary in most Buddhist traditions. In Theravada Buddhism, it's called Magha Puja. In Southeast Asian Buddhism, or Sangha Day. And the lunar anniversary of the Sangha spontaneously coming together after they'd all gone forth in different directions out into the world to teach. The Buddha enjoined them to do for the good of the many, for the welfare of the world, and advised them even not for even two of them to go in the same direction. Think about that, barefoot, going out in all directions. Nothing but their awakening. Nothing but their sila and samadhi, and their robes and their alms bowls with them. And the things that come with awakening, being awakened beings, what that meant for them, what that meant for the Buddha. At that time, that meant to the Buddha's eye, there was a lot of need in the world, and there was a lot that the Dhamma that he had awakened to could do that directly touches on that need and can make an enormous difference with it in terms of whether there is suffering or not. Just boiling down to that, all what later was called all 84,000 teachings, 84,000, even 84,000 branches of teachings, then all boiled down to suffering and the end of suffering, or the ending of suffering. So we're going to be talking today about some things that are very special, important for this. But this full moon that was shining so brightly just a few hours ago was the anniversary of that first group of those who went forth, then all coming back together again under the February full moon. And later on, then there were other things that happened. The Buddha's foremost disciples, foremost in wisdom, foremost in spiritual power, not only him, but others who had awakened, who had great and excellent qualities in Dhamma sharing, then also officially recognizing them as chief disciples, Sariputta, Mahamukhalana. And later on, then his two chief Bhikkhunī disciples as well, Khema of great wisdom, and Upalawana of great spiritual power. And then for us as Bhikkhunis, female bhikkhus, as this community here is a Bhikkhunis community, it started nearly 12 years ago. Here in Northern California, it was the very first community for Bhikkhunis in Theravada Buddhism in the Western United States. Just a little bit more than a decade ago. So it's not so long, in fact. And, well, the first Bhikkhuni, first one, we say, according to the story anyhow, the first Bhikkhuni, Mahapajapati Gautami, also, now it's nearly 2,600 years since she had the great courage to go forth together with her kinswomen, friends, relatives, even those who had been her servants, all went forth then in the great equality of the samana life. Now nearly 2,600 years ago, in September, the September full moon, then begin the 2,600-year anniversary. And this full moon, February full moon, now is the lunar anniversary of her passing away after her own awakening and that of her fellow women who went forth into Buddhist monastic life. They experienced what we call in Pali Buddhanubuddham, which means awakening after the awakened one. So this is called the Tathālokā Buddha, means who is awakened as a disciple of the Buddha, or the woman who is such. Sāvika Buddha. Yes. So a great number of the awakened women disciples of the Buddha, after how many years? How many years of teaching? How many years of the Buddha's teaching? No, how many years did the Buddha teach? Asking them and ask the community
45.
This is, thank you. I hope you can hear all those others who are here now. There was all like one voice and one heart together. They said 45. So after 45 years of the Buddha's teaching, and after 40 years of Mahapajapati's teaching, awakening and teaching her kinswomen, and the people, the lands around there, then at the age of 120, under the February full moon, she passed into Parinibbana, final nirvana. And we had a day-long retreat a couple of days ago where we were contemplating some of her teachings and the story of her passing away. And we normally think about passing away as a sad thing, but she said, "Today is a day of joy. Don't be depressed. Don't be sad for me. I waited for this for a long time." So she made no bones about being happy. We were saying someone shouldn't get old, or like not to talk about aging or death or that kind of thing. But in the Buddha's teaching, what Mahapajapati said by this February full moon before she passed away, it's like she didn't seem unhappy about 120 years old. Then we think that's pretty fantastic. And the Buddha asked to remember this, and even that it was something worthy of joy, worthy of celebration to contemplate. So this is the life well lived in Buddhism, not a defeat, but a great success, and something worthy of remembering, even for not only decades but centuries, not only centuries but even millennia. Yeah, what a wonderful thing. So now I'd like to come to the topic of today's Dhamma reflection and Dhamma sharing. Already I started talking a little bit about awakening, which I want to do. Means if there's any chance, then I'd love to talk about that subject whenever possible. So today I'm going to be speaking about moral awakening. And this is not a translation, an exact translation of a Pali term or a Sanskrit term, which is rare for me. But it's just the words that seem really right and proper to me in contemporary English for what I'd like to speak about. So I know that some of you are online, even from other parts of the world, Eastern Europe and other places, as well as different places in the United States, maybe Canada. From different places around the world, and I've observed something, even though I don't generally watch the news or read the newspaper or even read magazines. I don't even read Dhamma magazines unless there's some special reason to. I used to, but I'm just happy enough without it anyway these days. I feel good enough even without that. I feel like I know basically what's going on in the world anyway, the kind of basic things that just go round and round generation after generation. But there are trends, and there's an interesting trend that I'm sensing even in my meditation time. sometimes these days. And this is where the title of moral awakening comes from. Now, as a young person growing up in the United States, I entered monastic life as a teenager. And I was an American teenager. And many of the things that people normally think about related to American teenagers were true for me also. And I went straight into monastic life from being an American teenager. And being a young person growing up in the United States, I grew up with something that could be called even a kind of counter-morality, or a kind of moral rebelliousness, or, a mind to question what we were being told, what people said, the status quo, and the way that morality was being taught to many of my peers, my fellow young people, was one that they felt was not well matching for them. Something that they weren't able to internalize, weren't able to recognize in their own hearts, or to really see the true value or meaning or benefit of. And there was a big disparity there. And so many of us experienced this big gap between what we felt was being even forced upon us as a kind of artificial morality or artificial ethics that we felt didn't serve us well, and what we sensed in our own hearts, even our own internal sense of morals and ethics. So much so that sometimes even to hear the word morality, already my mind would turn off, my mind would close, because somehow that's the way what we were being taught as morality was broached with us. It had that kind of effect for us. And that stayed with me for quite a long time. So even in Buddhism, in terms of the form of the precepts, now I'm a bhikkhunī, 311 precepts, all with their letters and their numbers and their various aspects and all of that. Oh my goodness, more than 10 precepts, more than 8 precepts, more than the kind of like the 3 precepts in which the Buddha taught fundamental morality. And yet for me it's been very important to get down into the deep heart of the morality. And fortunately, this Buddhist path has good things in it for that. And I very much appreciate the ehipassiko, the come and see teaching of the Buddhas. That's part of our daily chanting, the daily Pali chanting in Theravada Buddhism. So chanted here daily with our monastic community. Ehipassiko, opanaiko. Ehipassiko means like come and see for yourself, to be seen and known for oneself, for themselves, by the wise. So I feel deeply grateful for the practices and the teachings in this path that have made it possible to touch into, for myself, what I would call the heart of morality, or the heart of integrity, the heart of moral virtue, which is, when one touches into it for oneself, the antithesis of something artificial, and something that's very deeply beautiful and wonderful, and can give one a sense of why this path is called Arya, or noble, why there's the use of the noble ones. One can have a sense of that for oneself. Not only in oneself, but one can also start to see it in others. Yeah. This is one of the very wonderful things. I don't know how it goes with web teaching, but I know in person Dhamma teaching, sometimes rather than just reading a book or reading an article, sometimes in person you can get a sense from the people. A sense that's even hard to put into words, that comes from the state of their heart, the state of the union. The state of the union of the aggregates for that person, for those conditions, and whether there is something beautiful, clean, and pure that has integrity and that beauty of virtue in it or not. A sense of healthiness or kusala, what's wholesome or unwholesome, so that how the mind reflects in the body, how the energy of consciousness even spreads through the space around the body, or even travels with the timbre of the voice. So, in modern times, in contemporary times, just recently, I've seen something happening that was different, that is different, that I sense to be different than that trend that I observed in my younger years in the United States, that I called a kind of a counter-morality. Like a breeze that has a different smell to it, something that has a different taste or a different feel to it. Yeah. So, excuse me for naming names, because the Buddha mentioned that these things are really not about the individual so much as about the karma, or about the quality or character of the action. And for karma, then the Buddha spoke of intention as being the root karma. Yeah? Even there's a statement, karma is intention. Intention is karma. In all of those 311 precepts, most of them, intention is a primary factor. So even if someone were to die in association with us, if we had no intention of harm to them, then it definitely wouldn't be one of those end of your monastic life, one strike only end of your monastic life offenses that we have in this Buddhist monastic life. It wouldn't be, there's no way that it could be, unless there was that intention. That was the intention to end the life of that other person. So the intention is key and primary. So I don't mean this to be about persons, really, but about the quality or character. But in contemporary times, with coming out in the world of the new Pope, and then also in the American presidential race, I've seen that this is something where now morality and integrity, moral virtue and integrity are right there, out there in the field, being discussed avidly, not with disgust, well, maybe sometimes with disgust, but not only, with this attitude that we had when we were younger, I didn't realize, but it was also imbued with and in response to a sense of the prevalence of a type of moral corruption. And that, like, you have to do particular things that are corrupt in one way or another to get along in society and to get along in the adult world, and that's the norm. And if you're going to be involved in it, then you have to be corrupted by it in one way or another, because that's the system, and it's just so deep and so widespread and so prevalent, so pervasive, that you can't really be a part of it and stay clean. kind of the antithesis of the image of the lotus in the Buddhist teaching, where the lotus is rooted in the muddy water with its roots down in the muddy water, and then it blossoms up, right there in the midst of it, and with any spot drop of muddy water that comes down on it, and the nature of the lotus petal skin is that it doesn't stick, it just beads up and rolls off, and you have the lotus there shining beautifully. So kind of the opposite idea of that symbol of the lotus in Buddhism. Like there's no way to be in the midst of it and be untainted. Yeah? And I think what I'm seeing these days is the appearance of some people or some actions. Really, it's behavior, it's actions in this world where there are people who have a lot of power, leading positions, and yet still there is some sense of there being a modicum, a measure, some quality of moral integrity intact. And, someone was joking, you can't live like that long in the world without somebody killing you. It's like dangerous for your life. And I was born the year that Martin Luther King died. And my mom talked to me about that. She felt like he really had something there. And, to grow up with parents who were raised in the 60s, they, who were young adults in the 60s, and they had this, quality of these strong intentions and to look into things. And yet also then they saw some of the main people who were voicing who were the voice of their ideals and who were active in these, and they're like not able to stand for it. And in Christianity, of course, then the whole idea of Jesus being put up on the cross pretty quickly, not being able to teach for a long time. It's part of the paradigm of the ideas that we have. And yet for the Buddha, with his wisdom and with his skillful means, and with the way that he taught the middle way in so many different facets, although there were the death threats, although there was even a kind of a murder attempt, according to the stories, and some kind of setup, like some competitors got the lady to put the wooden piece of wood underneath her sari or her dress, and then stand up and accuse the Buddha of being the father. Not that he wasn't a father. I mean, he had a child. He had a wife. And according to the story, before his Great Awakening, he really debated about whether, wanted to go back to a family life or not, remembering his wonderful wife and child and all that. But there was a conscious choice there. So, all of these things happen in the Buddhist story, but he was able to teach for 45 years, up to the age of 80. So to a ripe old age, to be able to share those 84,000 Dhamma khandas that I mentioned earlier, stacks of books of the teaching. It's a long stack. So, here in the United States, internationally, and I think in Canada as well. I see one friend's face there in the tiny thumbnail who might be in Canada. And even with the new leadership in Canada, there are those who, amongst friends who have gotten activated, inspired, encouraged by the bravery in just going ahead with the things that are held as values, and not seeming so hindered by all of what had been contemporary mainstream paradigms that say, no, you can't do that. You have to compromise that. All those things that are your ethics and values, they have to be compromised here, and compromised there, and compromised on the other side. Yeah. So seeing people, those who are living differently, is such an important and fundamental aspect of this process. And then there's what gets awoken in ourselves through the contact with those who are like in our Buddhist chant. We appreciate every day and share merit with those we call like the sun and the moon. The sun and the moon in this case doesn't mean the sun in the sky and the moon in the sky. It means those who are luminaries to us, those who have some sort of qualities that are like a light and a beacon to us and touch something in our own hearts. And in terms of Sangha and the way that Sangha works, to touch our hearts in a way that turns on something in our neurobiology. It activates something in our mirror neurons that makes it so seeing that in another, then also it begins to turn on that program. What was that latent potential there in ourselves, and that starts to activate. And then there are the other things that come together with that. For some people, it happens just on their own, just by themselves, but this is much more rare. Even when we're just by ourselves, supposing we're on a solo meditation retreat at Aranyabodhi Awakening Forest Hermitage, or some other place, a cave or a little rented room on the coast up to the north of here in the beautiful area, or whatever it may be. Even we're by ourselves, often it gets activated by memory or by hearing or by reading the Dhamma. Often it's activated through our connectivity with one another. And then what I would like to call the moral awakening begins in us as well. A friend of mine shared a video with me of a woman who is a little bit younger than me, who is, I don't know that she's a Buddhist. She didn't mention anything about this, but just through seeing some of the contemporary people out there, she started to experience this moral awakening happening for her. Maybe not so different than me in age, so a similar experience in youth with feeling even a kind of deadness or despair or hopelessness in these regards. But from what she's seeing at this time and what she's encountering, that is all turning around. Yeah. So seeing this video is actually where the words the moral awakening came to me. It's not that there is no Pali or Sanskrit basis for it, and I'd like to speak a little bit about that. And I want to ask Ani Wangmo, who's here, also to let me know. I'm going to speak a little bit about this, and then I want to give some time for questions, questions or reflections or discussion. But so often I come back to the early Buddhist teachings and the Pali texts related to what I'm seeing in the contemporary world of this body and mind, internally and externally. Yeah. Now we've just been talking about some things that we often, I've been seeing and others have been seeing, would say, out in the external world, but then also what they're perceiving in themselves and how that's changing them. So for moral awakening, I'm going to come to one of the least popular teachings in contemporary American Buddhism, or up until now. it has been. And I mentioned something about this. Now, I'm not going to give any a direct translation to you, because the way that these words have been directly translated have been ways that often have, well, I'd say, an unwholesome effect for people. Yeah, maybe you'll recognize it. So the words that I'm going to talk about now are hiri and otapa. And this is what comes to mind for me with regards the moral awakening. Moral awakening. Yeah. So hiri otapa as a combination are in the Pali texts, in the suttas. They are sometimes called the ground and basis of the path. Yeah. So I'm going to go into what they mean, and I think you'll recognize them. But not only are they ground and basis of the path, but they're also a fruition state. Means they're part of the fruits of the path. So I want to talk about that just a little bit now. So hiri in the Pali text. Now, some of you might know hiri. Ani Wangmo might know hiri as Hri in Tibetan Buddhism.
Yes, Hri.
Hri, I think, is a bija mantra. I don't know much about tantric teachings, so I can't say, but I understand that Hri or hiri in Pali actually plays an important role in the tantric teachings as a kind of a seed mantra. So I'm going to be saying Hri or hiri a whole bunch of times now, just to let you know. And it's often conjoined with otapa. So hiri is said to be ajata samutthana. Ajata means that which is personal or subjective, which arises from within, which originates from within. And when it's established, that's the samutthana part, it makes the mind firm, inwardly well-grounded, and quite set free. So it both establishes and liberates the mind. How's that for fantastic? Yeah? And then otapa, I'm going to speak about what is the opposite of otapa first. The opposite of otapa is reckless, which I was talking about my behavior as a teenager. Reckless. Oh boy. There was a lot of reckless behavior. And just because I couldn't really see or really feel the consequences, or because of a rejection of what seemed like that artificial morality which didn't arise from within, in which I didn't feel a connection to, and I didn't sense and know as being well-grounded or as liberating in myself. So we're talking about what is just the opposite. Yeah. So what is not otapa is considered reckless or hard. It makes the mind hard. And so as a quality for people, or not people themselves, but people's behavior, or we could even say in our bodies, when we talk about being hard-hearted, hard-headed, hard-headed or hard-hearted. Yeah, there's something I know. I've experienced it for myself when something happened, and the way that I saw that, the way that I received it, the way that I took it in and held it in myself or responded to it in myself, it made my heart feel hard, or it made my chest feel hard, or it made my belly feel hard, or it made my shoulders hard, or my jaws hard, or my head hard and hurt. Yeah. So what is not otapa has that quality of hardness, of binding up, of getting stuck in a negative way. And otapa itself has the opposite quality. We're talking about the opposite quality here. So when we think about the kind of natural qualities of the path, there's the antithesis of that hardness, that where our heart was bound up and it starts to unbind, and it's like the water begins to be able to flow a little bit, and the energy starts to move, and then there's releasing happening, and then there's a liberation of that energy that was trapped and bound up in negative things. So this is what we're talking about here with Hiri and Otapa. Hiri or Hri and Shri are also considered amongst some of the most blessed things in the ancient Buddhist cultures. And they're even the names of two goddesses of like their qualities of wonderfulness, beauty, good fortune, to be like a blessing for people or a city or a town or a society, or even for the whole planet, due to the qualities that they represent. So Hiri and Otapa, which I'm contemplating here, are two of the 7 treasures known as the Aryatana, the sublime treasures of the noble ones. And they're also called innate qualities of the customs and culture of the noble ones, of the awakened ones. And I'll give them to you in context right now. The first is Saddha, confidence, trust, or faith. Then Sila, moral virtue, precepts. And then here, Hiri and Otapa come right in the center. After that, there's Sutta, to be well learned, well learned. And in the Buddhist context particularly, to be well learned in what the Buddha taught, what we're talking about right now, as well as well learned in the investigation. There's that aspect as well. So to really know our own body and mind, not only to have theoretical knowledge. Then there's Chaga, which is liberality, generosity, both generosity and renunciation. The Chaga holds both of those things together, not in conflict with each other, but as facets of each other. Isn't that interesting? And then wisdom, Panya or Pragya. Yeah, so Hiri and Otapa are right there in this very important group. And it's interesting to see that the Dhamma is being equated not only with the treasure here, but with a whole culture. The culture of the noble ones, the culture of the Buddhas, the culture of awakening, a culture of moral virtue and awakening, together with wisdom. Yeah. So this, I think, is what we would properly call the hallmarks of Buddhist culture. Yeah. So what is not Hiri? Unscrupulous. Now, scruples and scrupulous, this is not a word that we use so much these days. I didn't grow up using it a lot, and even I only often heard it in a negative context. But in this case, it means that the person has their own morals that are, as I said earlier, internally arisen and based. Yes, so we could even translate this as conscious, but well grounded. Well grounded in Buddha's teaching. What it means for that to be well grounded, do you know? It means well grounded means through seeing cause and effect. Seeing cause and effect. And this is where moral awakening often happens with people in their lives. I talked about meeting others who have that quality and that galvanizing it. But I know many people for whom Hiri Otapa really coming into play, coming into being and activating for them came from having a kind of awakening. And this kind of awakening involved seeing the harm that they never saw in what was being done before. Let's say what was being done, maybe their own actions, maybe the actions of others, maybe what's going on in the society or culture that is not bearing those salient qualities that I just talked about. Seeing the harm in that, and seeing the harm in what's happening or what's going on in such a way that the part that one has played in that means one's own actions of body, of speech, and of mind. Uh, the part, the way that one has been involved in that, often blindly, because this is a kind of awakening. When it happens, you feel like you had been living intoxicated, like you've been living with blinders on, like you've been living drugged. Yeah? And then there's somehow the sudden clearing of your mind, opening of your eyes, taking off the blinders, and then you're able to see what's going on and able to see the cause and effect. And the very, very important aspect of this is, for Hiri, this is often an oh no moment. And that seems negative. Even in the kind of classical contemporary way this is taught, it's an oh bleep moment. Yes? Like when one realizes one was walking and suddenly you realize there's a squish and a smell and you realize you've stepped in doggy doo-doo or some other kind of doo-doo, some kind of dung. And then you see, even though you had just taken a shower and you're wearing your clean clothes and you have your nice new shoes on, oh no, you just stepped in it. Squish. And then you go, oh no, oh bleep. Yeah. For Hiri, then there's a sense of disgust that arises with it, a feeling of disgust. And that's one aspect of it. And this is not considered a bad or a negative thing. When we see the harm in something, or when we see that something was negative or unwholesome or unhealthy and not serving well, it's a natural and healthy part of our morality, of our moral integrity, of our conscience, to feel a kind of disgust with that automatically makes us want to get out of it. Then the other aspect is then a withdrawing. There's something in the mind that will then, like taking one's foot out of the cow patty or whatever, but withdrawing from it. Now, if you've really stepped in dung physically, it's going to stay on your shoe for a while. But for this heart quality, when the heart withdraws from that, in this quality of moral awakening, there isn't that. There isn't the sense of still being in the same kind of way, like fully immersed in the dung. Not quite in the same way. The mind withdraws, and then there's the sense of actually getting a different perspective. Like almost like going up to the top of a hill and looking out over the ocean and the fields and being able to see the things around in a way that one couldn't see from a different location. So it's like the perspective, like the location has changed. This is why I like to call it a moral awakening, because at that point, then one feels it would not be worthy of oneself, of one's own integrity, to continue to behave in the way that one did in past, when one was blind, when one was drugged, when one was, well, before that awakening experience, right? With it and with that vantage, there comes a sense of clear space, openness, and possibility. And with that, other wholesome qualities, often flood into the vacuity. Joy, courage, a sense of power. I want to get down to where Hiri and Ottapa's place in the powers. But I'll come to that in just a moment. Consciousness. We'd say in contemporary English, it's like there's an expansion of consciousness, or there's an evolution of consciousness. We just say that, but in classical Buddhist terminology, we'd say there's a seeing and a knowing that happens. And that seeing, that level of seeing and knowing that comes with Tathālokā as a ground of the path is also then later in its fruition, or even immediately in its fruition, considered one of the, it's a fundamental aspect of insight, knowledge, and wisdom. Right view happens there into causation and into our own place. It is the role of our intentional actions of body, speech, and mind in what's going on. And that's where the empowerment comes from, because then we realize that every thought that we have is causal and effective. Yeah? Every word, also causal and effective. Every behavior, nothing that's outside of the sphere of where this fits in the path. Yeah? So I told you I wanted to talk about Hiri as a power, which is what I'm seeing these days, externally and with people, and what I've experienced for myself as well. Hiri and Ottapa are two of the 7 powers for ending of the asavas. There are 7 that are mentioned. 2 of 7 makes a pretty high percentage. Yeah? And I talked to you about Hiri and Ottapa as a base, and here's where it has a much higher ranking. So for those of you who've studied a lot of Dharma, or even a little bit of Dhamma that was well taught, you might have heard about the ending of the asavas. It appears at the end of many suttas. In fact, all of the suttas where someone wakes up, you have Kinasawa, the ending of the defilements, the ending of the cankers. The cankers are cut off, and then there's no more. With that, then this constant craving for other things, for more, or for less, or for something else, or for whatever it may be, and all of the attachments that come with all of that just has no basis anymore, no need anymore. So these 7 powers for the ending of the asavas, these are called the keen asavas, ending the asavas, palani, powers. Saddha, again, confidence, faith, trust, vidya. So these are the companions here of Hiri, Ottapa, and things that come together with that is a base quality. Vidya means what? I have a friend named Vidya. Yeah. Energy. Sometimes it's related in English to the word valiant, I think, even to the word virile. But it's not only for men. And in this case, we're talking about something that's a quality of the heart, and it directly relates to that courage, the courage that we see with people when they experience moral awakening. Then there's a base of energy for them that gets touched into and gets activated individually and even as collectives, even on the social level. When there is such an awakening, then that power, that strength comes forth. Now, in the Buddha's teaching, this should be with the power of sati, so with the power of mindfulness and clear comprehension. So this is very important, this grouping of powers, and that these things come together. Now, as part of this moral awakening I've been talking about, the sati, the mindfulness and clear comprehension plays a very key role. It's actually the mindfulness turning on and that clear comprehension turning on, that faculty, that's what enables that sense of awakening and that perspective to happen. It's part of the hiri-ottappa. And then in terms of the powers, if one then applies oneself for all of that, what was like dead energy or scattered energy, when that's all gathered together and unified and applied together, then we have the power of samadhi. Yes? And with the understanding that comes, the seeing and knowing that comes, the ability to discern, yeah, then we have the power of panya. And out of this arises hiri-ottappa in the fruition state. Yeah, and this would be like the deep moral integrity, or you'd say the conscience, or the consciousness, the moral awareness, proactive moral awareness, and base of action for who has experienced such awakening in the past. Yeah. So I want to give you now a brief overview of ending summary overview of hiri and ottappa, which I've been speaking about with regards to moral awakening in the Buddhist teaching. And then I'm going to, after that, I'll stop with my talk and we can have time for questions and discussion. So an overview of hiri and ottappa, this kind of moral awakening or awakened moral being in the Buddhist teaching. The Buddha mentioned this as a quality that distinguishes a true samana or a true brahmana. So I feel like it's important to mention both here, because in this case the Buddha is not speaking about samanas and brahmanas just as monastics, but it's like to cover everyone who considers themselves to be a spiritual person, or would say contemporarily a practitioner. Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi translated it as anyone who is a contemplative, a true contemplative. So this is a distinguishing quality. The samana literally means peaceful one who is dedicated to peace, or one who has a kind of equal mind, which is one of the old special meanings of the samana way, which is a root, a founding root in Buddhist monastic life. The Buddha himself was called by many people Maha Samana, by those who weren't even Buddhist, because of bearing these qualities, these types of qualities, being a real live living exemplar practitioner of these qualities. So that's in the Majjhima Nikaya, the middle length discourses of the Buddha. This is the focus. Then in the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses of the Buddha, the Buddha focuses in on hiri ottappa as basis or bases for acquiring discernment and wisdom. So for the development, cultivation of, and then the fruition of discernment and wisdom. So panya, pragya. And then in the Khuddaka Nikaya, in the Iti-Uttaka text, Khuddaka Nikaya, Suvijana, what's a nice translation in English for that? The fifth group of discourses of the Buddha.
But there's supposed to be a smaller collection, but actually
it's a group of smaller collections, which includes the Dhammapada, which includes the Therigatha, And it includes the Iti-Uttaka, which is such an excellent, great collection of teachings that the Buddha gave to one of his great lay women disciples. So she heard from the Buddha and she became an eminent Dhamma teacher. And after the Buddha passed away, then the Buddhist monks went to her to get back that collection of teachings, to get it incorporated into the Tipitaka. And so she then recited what she had been taught, what she had heard from the Buddha, that she was then teaching others with his blessing and direction. In fact, a large group of individuals who, due to their place in society, were not allowed to go out to the Buddha's teaching. So there in the Khuddaka Nikaya Iti-Uttaka text, these qualities are called a quality that safeguards the world. And to me, right now, for what I'm seeing out in the world, I feel like this is very, very important for us, and important to know this context in the Buddha's teaching, to understand this safeguard the world. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the connected discourses of the Buddha, Hiri and Ottappa are known as rare and precious qualities, like gems or jewels that are priceless, like you cannot pay enough to be able to have and get these qualities in your own life and heart, in your own experience. There's no way to pay for it. But the precious jewels of life, intact integrity in our own hearts, liberated moral virtue. And then in Anguttara Nikaya, also called a treasure. And then last, and this is the last quality that I want to mention, that is one that I've really been reflecting upon. Hiri and Ottappa are called guardians of the world. This is Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation, but it's very literal. There's a sutta called the Lokapala Sutta. Lokapala. Lokapala are the guardians of the world. That's this world. Lokapala Sutta, guardians of the world. In this sutta, the Buddha says to the bhikkhus, there are two bright qualities that guard the world. Which two? Hiri and Ottappa. Yes? Ajahn Thanissaro has translated these as conscience and caring concern. I feel like that's nice and much easier to palate than shame and moral dread, which some people have used for repentance and reformation or contrition and conversion or these kinds of things. But I'm just happy with Hiri and Ottappa right now, knowing what we know about them. These two bright qualities there in the numerical discourses of the Buddha are called Dhamma Sukha. Dhamma Sukha. Sukha Dhamma Lokam Palenti. Dhamma Sukha. In this case, Sukha is not the Sukha of bliss or happiness, although that quality is certainly there. This Sukha is might have been used for what's like the pure brilliance of the moonlight. Early this morning before the dawn, as it was shining, stood, and I just felt, in my heart, body, and mind, the pure brilliance of the moonlight. This sukha means white, bright, pure, or good, and it's the opposite in the Pali text of what is literally called the dark side. It's true, it's there. It didn't only come from Star Wars, they got it from somewhere. The dark side, the kanapaka, the sukapaka is the bright side, the bright side, the light side. So the Buddha mentioned avoid the dark side. And, these qualities of Hiri and Ottappa then are called Dhamma Sukha. This is the radiance, the illumination, the brightness, the purity, and clarity of the Dhamma that are protectors of the world. Lokam Palenti. Yes. And Sukha in the path of practice also means to practice with a bright heart or a good mind. So to practice eagerly. And it said that the complexion of one who does practice in this kind of way is also Sukha. Yes, which means that, and I'm sure that all of you have seen this, when someone is practicing beautifully and well, there's a radiance that emerges from their bodies, from their eyes, from their faces. And this is the Dhamma Sukha, the radiating quality that is a protector and guardian of the world. So I'm going to then end my lecture here. And I'd like to give time for your questions, shared reflections, discussion.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu,
I have a whole room of people here. I'd like to give a chance to those who have joined from afar first, if that seems good. Otherwise, then I'll ask someone here to share their question.
Maybe I can start.
Yes?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank you from the deepest part of my heart for your words and for your inspiration. It is really a great moment for me. I would like you to give us some insight into the relationship between teacher and student in terms of moral awakening. I understand your symbol of sun and moon in this way, that there needs to be a deep connection, and it also helps students in understanding and entering the path. But can you give us some more detail in this sense?
Yes. When we see someone that, for whatever reason, we have a sense of identity with, we feel a connection with them. There's something profound that happens in ourselves. And if that person is, I'll say in a bad way, then that can draw us down. If we're not strong, if we don't have our own moral grounding very well established, that can drag us down. And if that person is exemplifying something that does shine brightly in our minds, that has that quality of Dhamma Sukha, then that can have the opposite effect. Rather than bringing up something low or demeaning and opening the low roads for us, it can have just the opposite effect. And in that sense of connection and recognizing where they are at, in a way, it gives us a hand up or gives us a foot up. And it can actually start to turn on those qualities in ourselves. So moral integrity, is a very important basis, I think, for the student-teacher relationship, such that there can be a sense of trust. Also, it's important for us, for those who are students, I think, to have discernment, to practice discernment. Because for most people, what they have going on is a mix of admirable and unadmirable qualities. And so it's very important with our moral integrity, and I'll say a kind of like a wise base of trust. Not a trust that's based on a false idealism or false expectations, but I'd say a wise base of trust. A wise base of trust, I personally think it's important for there to be a discernment there and to understand that the vast majority of beings who are in the process of awakening but may not yet be fully awakened. If they're not fully awakened, then there may be the things that they're exemplifying that are inspiring to us and are great to take on as examples. But where the discernment part comes in is there may be things also, likely things also, that are not good for us to take on as examples or models for our own behavior. Maybe they're a model for what not to do. And that is completely fine, completely proper. Here in contemporary American culture, especially with those who are considered religious figures or teachers or leaders, sometimes there's a kind of idealistic extremism that leads people to do something that I hear them call throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Meaning that there is something good and important there, but because there are other things, then that non-realistically grounded, extreme moral idealism will lead someone, when they see something that's not good, to throw out the whole thing, rather than just having the discernment to be able to recognize this is something inspiring and worthy of emulation and worthy of development, and this is something that's not. And to take this one as an example of what not to do. It's also a teaching, yeah, and to just take it, this is an example of what not to do, and to be clear about that. One can be clear and equanimous about these things. It's possible. I know it can be challenging. It's certainly a practice that's worthy of development, because as much as we're able to do this, it brings us a really good grounding in the truthfulness of things that isn't based on a kind of impossible moral idealism. Impossible moral idealism. So that would be like false expectations, because those, otherwise they can have their whole number of pitfalls. Yeah. So with moral awakening, this is really about, cultivating and enabling, activating our own clear seeing and knowing, our own discernment as a base of practice, as a base for then how we're going to be using our mind, using our speech, using our actions. And, we're free in these regards. Really, no one else has any control over this. But if we're not discerning, then when we're with people and they have some admirable and unadmirable qualities, especially if we're around them a lot, sometimes we can just take on everything. And then you have students of a teacher who it's like they haven't only taken on the good things and combined them with their own good things and the good things of another teacher. That's excellent and ideal. But it's like they've taken on everything. So classically, it's said that the greatest thing is for the student to surpass the teacher. Yeah, of course, if the teacher is a fully awakened one, then how can you top that? And who would want to anyway? So it's redundant. But if the teacher has excellent qualities and then you combine them with other excellent qualities from someone else and you learn from them about the things not to do, that's really, it's wise and it's skillful. And to be so wise and skillful combined with the good intentions that are the base of the path, and then developing the discernment, the wisdom, the panya, and this type of skill, then really you can turn the Dhamma wheel well in your own body and mind, in your life. The Dhamma wheel will turn. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Does someone else have
illuminating. So, if I understand correctly, you're saying that it's not only up to the teacher to have all these good qualities, but also from the part of the student to have good intention and to follow good qualities without being very idealistic.
Yes, I'll give you an example actually of what I'm talking about from ancient times. Now, if you see the images of the Buddha over here, and then on the left side, I don't know if you can see, there's the Sankamita, ancient Bhikkhunī who traveled from India to Sri Lanka. And sometimes you see, this is a temporary and rented place. In our permanent place, who knows? Sometime maybe the artist will paint all the disciples of the Buddha, like all around in the great painting. They all look the same, but they're all commended by the Buddha for different qualities. And when we read the old text, we see the Buddha sending someone who came inspired by him to one teacher because of that teacher's specific qualities that the Buddha himself thought would be useful for that student, that disciple, and then sending to another to develop some other excellent qualities. So these are even the ancient Arahant disciples of the Buddha. They weren't all expected to all have every good, fantastic, wonderful quality. And so I think if that's true even for Arahants, awakened ones, awakened disciples of the Buddha, then how much the more true for everyone else. So a realistic grounding is I wouldn't expect anyone, not even a perfect teacher, to be replete in every single good quality. Some who become awakened ones don't even have the special merit to teach. To teach effectively requires things that are not necessary for awakening. For example, charisma. Some people have an extraordinary amount of charisma, but no wisdom. You see this super music star or super movie star or this kind of thing, and they've got enormous charisma and they become powerful, and then they're so unhappy they commit suicide. Right? It happens. And to become awakened, one doesn't have to have that kind of charisma, but to be effective as a teacher, there has to be a certain amount of it. So I think in terms of realistically grounding our expectations, it's really important to know, this is true for awakened teachers, fully awakened teachers, not to mention all the rest of us. So I expect amongst those who are with me in my monastic community here and those who come to visit, it's such a wonderful thing. It's like mining for treasure in a way, to see, what are their unique virtues and qualities that they're bringing, that they're showing, and also their unique challenges. And those unique challenges don't mean that they're bad people or that they're insincere or that they're not making progress on the path or that they're not offering a lot of benefit to others. They are doing all of those things. Yeah. And I would get into trouble myself if I expected or demanded or thought something was wrong if they weren't perfect in every single way that I could imagine. Right? We have to get beyond our imagination sometimes too. So I'd like to give someone else a chance, whether among those who are here together. I have monastics sitting on my left hand and on my right hand spread around the room here that you can't see, as well as friends who are or sitting here in front of me who you also can't see. And I'd like to give someone else a chance. Oh, wait, someone here. Is it okay if I say who you are?
Yes.
This is Melissa here. She has a question.
I was struck by the word I've written down, ahipasiko.
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 Come and see
for yourself.
Come and see for yourself, yeah.
I'm interested in relating that to Hiri.
Yes.
H-I-R-I.
Yes. So this is a question about relating ahipasiko to hiri or hri.
And otapa.
Okay. So hiri and otapa, when we have an experience of hiri and otapa, it's arisen from within ourselves, grounded in ourselves. It is an experience of seeing for ourselves. So this Dhamma that we're called to see for ourselves, where is it that we see it? Where is it that we're called to see and know it? Is there any way that can happen outside of ourselves? Even when we read the book and we see the Dhamma teachings printed on the page, it's really, that experience, what we know of it is happening in our own mind. When we see the teachers and when we're with them, whatever wonderful qualities or whatever kind of criticisms or discernments or whatever these things may be, that really where is that happening? It's happening within our own self, within our own mind. But in this case, we're being conscious about that. That this is a real process actually of turning around. Many people describe it as a kind of a 360, really turning around in ourselves that enables us to see for ourselves differently. So the come and see for yourself is inviting not only a theoretical knowledge of these dhammas, but the actual seeing and knowing of them with mindfulness and clear comprehension.
Well, I know that
wisdom happening.
The Kalama Sutra.
Yes.
Where the Buddha says, don't believe a word I say. Experiment yourself. Don't take my word for it. Go ahead and practice yourself. So practicing, the idea comes to me of practicing hiri and
yes.
I have to keep looking at the word. The language is so different to me.
It is.
Otapa.
Otapa.
And actually, yes, thinking of them in terms of the practice.
Yes.
Itself.
I agree with you. So I don't know if everyone has been able to hear Melissa or not. But she's reflecting on hiri and otapa as practice, and I feel like I just have a very simple answer to that, and it's yes. Does someone else from afar have a question? Something you'd like to share?
Aya, this is Lisa I'm in the UK, and I just wanted to say how wonderful it is to finally meet you, even though it's through the ether.
Oh, Lisa, I'm happy to see you there.
It's such a great blessing, and this has been just a beautiful talk. Thank you so much, and for the opportunity to everybody for organizing this. It's really, really special. Just reflecting on a few things. For mutual reflection, hopefully you can help to guide me. Because one thing that I notice when I falter, well, first of all, I've been out of the midst of Sangha for various reasons for a very long time, and I really appreciate what you said about the mirroring. So the mirroring that happens, that latent part of us lights up immediately again when we're in the midst of the Noble Sangha. And you often hear about how people who are addicted to certain patterns of behavior or substance addiction, that it's very hard for them to come out of these addictions because they're in the midst of people who light up other parts of them, right? So people who, their friends are also addicted, and they're attached to their friends, and so it's really hard for them to come out of that addiction pattern. One of the things that I notice is an edge of when we're caught. It's very difficult for us to come out of certain patterns, or we're held by I've lost my train of thought here. Yes, when we fall. So when we fall, morally speaking, there can be a moment where we feel like we've lost, like it's too late. So we've already fallen, and it's too late to come back. So there's, I think in myself now, because I've been sort of out of things, and my addiction is just to Facebook right now. I have this challenge where I'm addicted to online communications because I'm away from, I'm not connected to Sangha, not connected to friends and family. And it just seems that you get into this pattern of addiction and not come out of it. Sometimes your mind just goes to this place where you think, well, it's too late. I've already misspoken, or I've already sort of gone into this far enough that I can't come out of it. And I also see that mirrored in society where, leaders will make decisions, go into wars, and they think, well, it's just, we're this far into it, we can't come out of it. And there's something in there that I'd like to go more deeply with, where you think you've reached a point of no return, but it's never too late to return. But what is it that sort of holds us there? We think, well, I've already made this mistake, and I feel this sort of sense of shame, but it's almost like I've already fallen, so it's too late. It's kind of too late to go back. So yeah. Sorry?
That's a different kind of sense of shame.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that you brought this up, because next week I was considering what I'd like to speak about next week, and I think I would like to speak about karma, sustainability, and freedom. And I don't know whether Ani Wangmo will choose to title it just Karma and Sustainability, or Karma, Sustainability, and Freedom. But I'd really like to look into this topic that you're bringing up more in this next week, and it's very important. The absence of Hiri and Otapa. There was a part of the way that this is classically, regularly taught in the Buddhist teaching that I didn't mention, that I think I'd like to come back to now, if I can find it. Give me just a moment to see if I am able to do that. If I have it here, I might not. Maybe we'll just talk about it next week. Let me see. I can no longer see the things close up with the glasses on. Well, I'll happily share it with you next week then, because I don't think that I have it here. But the absence of Hiri and Otapa is also appears in several teachings on what are called the kilesa watus, and that means like ground and basis for the kilesas to arise, which is what you're talking about here. And one of the reasons why I didn't want to translate Hiri and Otapa offhand right away is because one of the most common translations of these two words elicits a whole different sense than what emerges when one understands the context and the meaning in the Buddhist teaching. And so sometimes, especially in contemporary Theravada Buddhism, in English, Hiri and Otapa are translated as shame and dread. And for the average American right now, when they hear shame and dread, what comes up for them in probably less than 1 second, it doesn't take long, is some other conditioning and a kind of shame that's damning and leads to hopelessness and leads to the energy going down and goes into the dark side for them. And this is the thing that I think many of us, or for myself and many of my peers, that we sensed as young people, and then we were hoping, we were trying to find some way out of that, and to see if there's some other alternative or possibility. And for me, that led to becoming a seeker as my whole life. It mattered that much to me. For others, sometimes it just means their development as human beings of integrity gets put on hold for decades, if not their entire life, or gets suffocated, or really gets bent, like contorted in some kind of way, in ways that do not lead to clarity of mind, that do not lead to this kind of power and this grouping of powers that are powers of awakening of the noble ones. It's just the antithesis. I've joked about going to the dark side, but we're talking about there's going to the dark side with it. So it's like a kind of quality of shame that's coupled, rather than it being a kind of moral awakening, then it's coupled with ignorance. And in a way that I've experienced this for myself and I've seen it for others. It's like the blinders come down and come over and everything becomes very narrow and it goes down into the darkness. And it's damning. So, yeah, you're talking about the opposite quality, and that's one reason why, for the ways that these words are regularly translated, I just didn't want to go there, because they bring up, when it brings up the opposite qualities in people that are unhealthy and unwholesome, that's not what this teaching is for. It's just completely, that's not what it's for. It's for the opposite. Yeah. And so I appreciate you mentioning that, and I look forward to exploring this in some ways more this next week, because I think you're right. For your work, everyone, I know Lisa, at least from afar, and working with NGOs and these big kind of governmental policy decision making and these types of things. I know you've seen a lot of this, and there is a lot of it in our world, and it does come down to that personal level also that you're talking about, where people just feel themselves disempowered and discouraged. And so we're moving in the opposite way. We're moving in the opposite way here now. It is important to be able to look at these things straight on. In the Four Noble Truths, dukkha is right up front there, and to be able to develop the internal integrity and moral basis to be able to look then at dukkha clearly, and the awareness and clear comprehension and the quality of not hardness of heart. What you're talking about there is something that's often connected with hardness of heart, placed to oneself, or received from others, or this type of thing. But just the opposite, unbinding and releasing, opening up and bringing fresh air and light really into all of these things, and letting that energy be transformed, because it's just trapped energy that can be applied or dedicated to anything in the whole universe. And our intention, and then these skills are a way of taking that and applying it in a way that is just so excellent for human beings and human life. I realize that we've just about come to the end of our time here. It's a little bit after 1:30 in California. I know Ani Wangwang said that there might be up to 5 minutes from now, that would be bonus time for anyone who wished to stay on for a little while longer. So I want to check if anyone else here or there has one last question, and then we'll wrap up until next week. Yeah.
The experience of Hiriotapa seems to me something, when it's wholesome, it's fully embodied. It's a fully embodied experience. Can you talk about responding out of that space?
So there's a question about the sense that's emerged with regards to Hiriotapa during this talk is of a fully embodied experience, and I really completely agree with that. And in fact, this is one of the ways that people come to Hiriotapa, and I'm seeing for a lot of friends, even they don't know these words, don't know how to pronounce them, but they're having the experience of it. And the way that this is often coming here in the United States in this time, in Theravada Buddhism, with the mindfulness and insight meditation communities, is people learn the 4 foundations of mindfulness, or the 4 bases for establishing mindfulness. They learn mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of mind, and mindfulness of various crucial dhammas. And for some people, it's through the mindfulness of the body that they become fully present, and becoming fully present and clearly comprehending, they naturally experience the moral shift. Which means that when they experience that, when they know that themselves, they no longer want to behave just the same way that they did before. It just doesn't seem like it becomes them. It's like they've taken a shower and they've grown, and are they going to go back and put on the old dirty clothes that are too small for them? It's just an expression, but people experience this in so many ways, and they feel inclined to live differently. And what we're talking about there is enabling a fully embodied experience of being, of awareness, of clear awareness and clear comprehension that is not separated from this heart of what I've been calling moral awakening, or our integrity as a human being. The healthiness and wholesomeness of our hearts. And not denying or excluding the body or the feelings or the mind, any of these bases of being from this picture. So I think I just want to agree with you there. Share that reflection with regards to mindfulness. I know now it's a hot commodity. It's so popular in the United States right now, and many people are experiencing that there's much more that that naturally comes with it. It's part of the Noble Eightfold Path, and one of the factors of awakening. And when it's combined together with the other factors of the path, or with the factors of awakening, it's a super powerful thing. And when it's disassociated, the other things, because they're in the healthy human psychology, body and mind, it's not that the other things are actually strictly separate. It's part of the integrated qualities of that we have potential for as human beings in these bodies and minds that get turned on and activated. It's best when they come on together. Yeah, but we're seeing a lot of people having these experiences and then wanting to live differently, no longer feeling like they should live in the same old way that they were before. After having periods, really strong periods working with mindfulness clear comprehensions. Something emerges there that is our moral guide and yardstick that comes right from, inside ourselves, not necessarily from anyone else.
I think you're talking about a self-respect, that out of respect for yourself, when you embody it, that then you wouldn't do some previous behavior.
Well, non-self-respect often means there's some sort of aversion to ourselves, or some kind of self-hatred, or some kind of disrespect from others that we've internalized. And if we can, unravel and release that a little bit, what's left is a sense of integrity. And that integrity, also another name for it would be self-respect, but not with pride or with egoism or aversion, and not to put anybody up or down and that kind of thing. But it's a quality of integrity. So I think that I'm going to pause there now until next week.